about having children,
Excuse me.
excited about having children. We look forward to it. Some of us, we play with young ladies play with the Barbie dolls and the baby dolls, and they pretend about being parents. And then you get older and it happens, right? Or you're planning your life. And there are all different curveballs that can be thrown at us. Autism is one that we could consider a curveball. It affects, 1 in 36 children. Boys are 4 times more likely to have autism than girls, and are usually identified sooner than girls. Um, and there are totally a lot of different reasons for why. Most of that, some articles are saying, is because of the way we socialize boys as opposed to girls. Um, some other facts that we could talk about are that 40% of children with autism do not speak. Um, that is one of the uh, nuances that are challenges for parents. And then you have to look at ages and stages also. But then the rate of autism is steadily growing and has grown over the last 20 years. So I will share with you some of my experiences, and I welcome questions. Keep in mind, this is, I'm going to use generalizations, but I'm also going to use my experiences. So when I'm talking, um, I'm using what I've observed as a parent, but not also only that, what I've observed as a clinician, which I feel like gives me a really interesting seat at the table for the discussion. Okay, so as a clinician and as a parent, we're looking at ages and stages. This is what your pediatricians are looking at. How your kids are developing over time, what mile markers they're reaching, what they're doing at certain ages. They use a generalization of what children should be doing by a certain age. Um, there were a lot of experiments that were done on kids, most notably twins and triplets, to see, what were the differences and nuances between what kids would do and how they present. So in my opinion and in my thoughts is, when I had my son, um, I have an older child, so I start there. I have an older child that's 10 years older than my son. And my daughter is what we would call um, normal neurotypical child. She hit all her mile markers on time. She um, is what, like I said, what we would call a neurotypical child who sat about the recommended time, used words about the recommended time. So I had a child to compare one development to another. And when my son was born, I noticed, even when he was small, that I would call his name and he wouldn't turn his head, or that you would squeak a toy and he wouldn't be interested in the toy, or he wouldn't look. So at first I thought maybe he was deaf, and that maybe we should be talking with a pediatrician about whether or not he could hear. And I was told that no, he passed all of his testing before he left the hospital. Everything was fine. That I was being an overzealous parent. But I noticed that, these were things that I was like, well, why isn't he looking at me? Why isn't he responding? Why isn't he cooing? You know, his temperament is pretty even. If people were saying, well, no, you're just overthinking it. He's fine. Um, I even talked with a psychiatrist friend of mine, a psychologist friend of mine, and they were like, "No, you're really, just give him some time, let him catch up." But as a parent, I knew that there were things that I was seeing at home that everybody else wasn't seeing. There were things that I saw in the clinical setting as a professional that I knew that was supposed to be happening that my child wasn't doing. Sitting up, rolling over, um, tummy time, looking for toys, things like that. He wasn't doing those things. And over time, as parents start to notice the things that other their children are not doing or that are doing, as opposed to children around them of the same age. Um, you start noticing things like, why isn't my child sleeping through the night, or why is my child always fussy when we go to certain places? And then you begin to just wonder if there could be something to what you're thinking, what you're observing. And so of course you reach out to professionals to help you with that. And most times they want you to give the child some time, because as you look at like the ages and stages for observation, um, they're broken down. Even like for infancy, infancy is broken down a little bit more. They go from 0 to 3 months, and 3 to 6, and 6 to 9, and so all of that together would be considered the infancy stage of a child. So if you go to the doctor, they will give you something, a questionnaire where you check off, whether your child are hitting the mile markers. And when you talk to your pediatrician, they will say, well, they still have time to catch up. And even if, they haven't hit this marker, it'll be fine. Usually children start, development of the brain is a long process, and if they don't sit up at a certain time, they'll catch up. And so usually outsiders will try to calm the parents' fears down by telling them to just wait a little while and see what happens. But for some parents, they're like, no, I can see things that are happening. And then you continue to see deficits over time of, social and emotional communication and interaction, the inadequacy of maybe their speech, impairment in their abilities to initiate or sustain conversation or eye contact. Um, Maybe you're paying attention to their language, or their inability to form language. Or you're just, you hear people say, well, boys will be boys. So what does that mean? They're rough and they're tumble. Well, maybe you have a child that doesn't like getting their hands dirty. So you're looking at that. It's like, oh, well, they're just a clean kid. Over time, you may feel like, okay, well, they're a clean child, but there's a little bit more to that. What does that look like? Um, so as parents, what I would suggest is keep track whenever you're going to get your shots and your immunizations for your children. Your pediatricians are going to ask you about this. And if you have some questions, make sure that you're and some concerns, make sure you're saying something. So as a clinician, I always look at, like I said, ages and stages, and what in general your child is supposed to be going through, what they're in general, what is supposed to be happening during that time. And as your child is developing, Erickson says that there are certain things that are foundational for small babies as they grow older into adulthood. And so trust versus mistrust would be the first thing that you would see, or that we observe in the clinical setting for babies. And that basically the basics. If your baby cries, you pick it up and soothe it. Well, what happens if you pick your baby up and soothing doesn't help, and they're still crying, and you're not able to soothe your baby? Or autonomy versus shame and doubt. That usually happens where your child will walk off by themselves, or they'll leave and um, go play with something, but they'll turn back and look at mom, or they'll turn back and look at dad. But what happens when your your baby goes off and plays on the slide? Or you would think that they would go off and play on the slide, but your child is just sitting there playing by themselves. Some parents would say, oh, they just like playing by themselves, and they're not interested in that. But I know I paid attention to that, and I went, he does that often. I wonder. So the menagerie of feelings. There is parents go through a lot because you're just trying to figure out what's happening, what's going on. Like I said, usually if this is your first baby, you may not have much to compare your baby's growth and development to. In my situation, I had a child already. She was 10. So growth and development and what that neurotypical growth and development looks like, plus being in the clinical setting and knowing what, as a clinician, neurotypical growth and development is supposed to look like. Um, I could only tell you that I knew, I knew, I knew, but it was the thing about trying to convince, if you will, other professionals to listen, because first thing I heard was, well, because you're a clinician, you're a little more overzealous about it. Maybe you're overthinking it. And then sometimes as a clinician, I would hear other people say that to moms and dads. And that was, sometimes that can be a little disheartening. But there's the menagerie of feelings that are happening there. You don't know what's happening and why, and you're just confused about, how do you help your child, and if there's anything you can do as a parent. You want to get in there and put your hands in and help as much as you can and do what you can. So like I said, I knew that my child was on the spectrum because I just, the signs, the symptoms, the things that were said, the things that weren't said, um I had I knew. But even receiving the diagnosis and getting confirmation, there was there was a grieving process even there for me. So you feel powerless. You're angry. The elephant in the room is, what did I do wrong? Where did what happened in between gestation and delivery that made this such that my child is the one that sticks out? Like, why? What happened? You're confused. Then you're in denial, like, okay, well, no. Maybe I'm tripping and I'm just putting more into this than what I should. And then you may feel guilty. You're like, okay, like I said, you're like, okay, before I found out I was pregnant, maybe I took a drink and I didn't know, or maybe you're disappointed, but there is a grieving process that happens because you feel powerless. There's nothing that you can physically do, tangibly do to make it go away. But then when you're in the waiting period of what's wrong, you want confirmation that you're not just imagining things. But then, you have to get to work. You have to keep going because you want to make sure that you're giving your baby the fighting chance that it needs and that they deserve. And so then you do all the things. You get the evaluations and you answer the questionnaires, and you go and see the doctors, and they tell you sometimes your baby may need certain medications. I put respite and support people, and I scratched it out because at that time, sometimes you don't want anybody else looking at, examining, asking questions for your child. But usually, as a professional, you would say, well, you need some time for respite, you need time to yourself. But as a parent, sometimes you're like, I don't want anybody else laying hands on touching my baby. You want to keep that baby close. You look out to your friends and your support. And then you look around and you go, okay, if there's not any example or prototype for you to look at, then you're like, okay, well, I'm alone. What what do I do now? Um, and that diagnosis brings such a great impact to your life, and you don't realize it until it happens. And then people are saying, okay, here, you're like, okay, here's your baby. Oh, my little sweet baby. And I'm going to love it. And I'm going to call it George. And then you look at George and you go, okay, George, I feel like something is, I can't put my finger on it, but I think something's happening. And then you get the diagnosis, and then people are saying, okay, this is what we need to do with George to make sure George has this robust life. So, like I said, the elephant in the room is that the fairy tale is over. And now you're wondering what's going to happen to your child. How are you going to parent? What is this going to look like? And I dare say it, and I'll have to say it because it's like, okay, my child's not normal. Normal means typical, neurotypical. Um, and there's something wrong with all of us. That's what my sweet grandma would say. There's something wrong with all of us. But to be honest with you, you're still thinking, why isn't my kid normal? Why can't my child just sit up? Why can't my child just talk? I would just give anything. Be honest with you, my son did not say mama. He didn't talk. And I was devastated. Everybody said, oh, my child said mom, my child said this, my child did that. And I'm sitting in the corner like, well, he ate peas. And yes, he did. And I was happy about that. But when you're comparing yourself to other parents and your child isn't speaking, your child isn't talking, the elephant in the room is what the heck happened. But then, the fairy tale is over of what you may have in your mind of what may happen for your child. Proms and those little funny moments. It doesn't mean they can't happen. They just have to happen in a different way now. Or they may have to happen in a different way. So it affected me personally. I didn't really take care of myself. I was more concerned about my son and getting things that he needed and making sure that he had everything he needed. But in that same caution, think about making sure that you have all the things that you need. Because if you don't have what you need, proper sleep, you're not taking care of yourself, you're not making sure that you have nutrition and medications that you need, you really don't have much to give to your child. So you're running on empty. You're, like I said, you're grieving because you're grieving what you never really think that you have all these preconceived notions of what your kid will be until somebody tells you that maybe there's a possibility that those things won't happen. And then you're like, oh goodness, I didn't think about that. Now what happens? It doesn't mean that they don't happen. It doesn't mean your child won't grow up and have, a prom or they won't get married. But when you think about the nuances of what has to happen, even when they're a little bitty, and then you look at the trajectory of what needs to happen when they're older, you're like, oh snap! Like, okay, you have mixed emotions about being a parent because everything that you thought that could or may be possible has to happen in a different way. And then the mixed emotions, you're then you wonder about, well, what does this say, or what does this look like for my family or your spiritual growth, or crushed hopes and dreams, and like I said, concerns about your future or your child's future too. Okay, so you never really think about how this affects your family unit, but you're stressed. The family unit is stressed no matter what it looks like. Sometimes there's limitations on what you can do and where you can go. Hear me out on this one. If your child is sensitive to lights and sounds, well, you don't take them to Disney on Ice, but everybody else took their kid to Disney on Ice. Well, you may not be able to take your child to Disney on Ice. Maybe you're not able to take your child to church. If that's where you want to go, especially sometimes the newer churches, they have a lot of theatrics and lights and cameras that could trigger child with autism depending on where they are on the spectrum. What you have to do then is change your new normal. So, for instance, when I took my son to church, we had noise canceling headphones, and we took him and we put shades on him. And then I always made sure that when we took him to church, that he never faced the stage. So he didn't see all the flickering lights. He heard the sounds, but he didn't see the lights. So I kept him facing me for a good majority of that time. And then over time, we started turning him around, and we saw that we had less tantrums because of all the lights and the theatrics. But he still kept the noise canceling headphones on. We took them everywhere. And at some point, he started taking them off and he just run around church. But that was a gradual thing. It didn't happen overnight. Sometimes for parents, you have to do extra preparation for where you're going to go. Okay, hear me out now. As parents, you don't think that you need all the bags until you have the kids. And then you have the diaper bag, you have your bag, you have a purse, you can become a bag lady for moms and dads. Um, But most definitely, you prepare for neurotypical children. You take wipes and things to make sure that they're all um, occupied, but you do a little bit of extra preparation, most definitely when your children are on the spectrum, just to make sure that you do your due diligence so that they are not triggered and that they are comfortable, and so are you and the people around you. So you plan a little extra. And sometimes you have to take a little help with you. So if you're married, or not, but coupled in some type of way, there's a stress on that. You feel as a unit. My husband and I felt isolated because we're looking around at our friend group, and there weren't, like I said, a prototype for us to look at. Then there's the financial stress because you're taking your kids to all these different doctors. My son saw a developmental pediatrician. He saw a pediatrician. He saw OT. He saw PT. I'm sorry, occupational therapy, physical therapy. We saw a nutritionist. There were all the things that we needed to do to make sure that we had my son thoroughly evaluated, um, so that we would understand what was happening to him from a medical standpoint. I had the mental health psychosocial thing on lock, but still saw someone else as well. Um, so there's a financial stress that goes to this. You have to educate yourself. Okay, I know my son, what my son needs, or what I think he may need as a parent. But then if you weren't sitting in my seat where I had a accelerated seat into neural development, child development, you have to get yourself up to par. And then, all the time and energy, you have to take off work. Who's taking off work? Who's doing these things? You're already thinking about those things as a parent. But then sometimes you feel like there's an uptick, and it takes it up a little bit when you are dealing with a child with special needs. Then you feel like, like, who's my support system? Like, what are we going to do? And then one thing I wanted to point out was intimacy between you and your partner. Sometimes that lacks because you're so focused on making sure your child is okay that your marital relationship sometimes decreases. Okay, so remember I told you I have a daughter that is 10 years older than my son. So I have a 19-year-old and a 9-year-old. Go figure. But here's the thing that a lot of people don't think about: the stress and anxiety this brings to your child. First of all, they may or may not want a sibling. Go figure. But now they become an extra defender and a protector because now they don't want their peer groups and people saying things to their kids. And then we put sometimes extra responsibility. Take care of your brother or sister, take them to the slide, bring them back, things like that. Somebody says something to your child that's on the spectrum, their sibling who's neurotypical, they feel the need to, in most cases, to defend and protect their sibling. Think about this also: the jealousy and rivalry. You have this child, if you have, whether they're older or younger, all the attention is going to the child that is now in the diagnosis process or had the diagnosis. And sometimes parents forget that the other children are having difficulties with it as well. And so sometimes you will see acting out or regression from children. Um, and, the older siblings, younger siblings, they don't know what's going on. We have to explain. Not only are we trying to explain it to ourselves and rationalize it ourselves, but then you also have other children in your home that are trying to rationalize this as well. So they go through a grieving process as well. They're grieving the parent. Like, hey, come to my muffins with moms, or whatever may be happening. Um, but there may be some aggression and regression. There's a whole bunch of aggression happening for the kids that are trying to figure this out too. And they're trying to make up the deficits, but then they're also concerned for their parents because they haven't seen this happening before. So it's all new for everybody. So I want you to remember that your child is an individual and not a copy. And we try to parent especially if our child on the spectrum is um, younger than other children. We try to parent them all the same. We can't. They're not all alike. Um, and you have to look at them as individuals. So is it really us versus them? The needs of the few versus the many. Um, you're looking at, there are so many different levels to what you're looking at as parents. You're weighing the marital relationship versus the needs of the neurodivergent child, your other siblings, the other siblings versus the neurodivergent child, and whose needs need to be first, whose needs need to be more prevalent, whose needs come to the front. Um, the needs of the people in the movie theater versus your child. And everybody thinks that their child is the most spectacular and loved, and we want everybody to feel like they are important. But then you have to weigh the needs of the few, meaning you and your child or you and your family versus everyone else out in the community and vice versa. And there's a delicate balance. Some people have taken the stance that they feel like everyone else has to move around and carousel around how you are moving within your specific unit. Say if you're out in the community, then you also have to think about how you're supposed to move and carousel around the community. Delicate balance. So you have to build yourself a community. Because I'm a social worker, I always think in micro, macro, and meso. So I'm looking at who is in my core group of friends and family who can help me in my core group, as for helping me with making sure that my son has all the things that he needs, but also what that we need. I always am concerned about childcare. So say for instance, I wanted to go to a concert and I wanted to go with friends. Well, pretty much all the people that I would ask to babysit are in my friend group. So if we're all wanting to go to the concert, well, that kind of leaves me out, if you will, because everybody that I would trust to take care of my child while I was gone or while I'm having fun is also going to the concert. Um, so you have to build yourself a community. What that looks like childcare, that looks like who can pick your child up in case you can't do that. Um, you need to create a team to help you navigate because no parent is an island. We try to do a lot on our own. Neurotypical or neurodivergent parent, you try, but you can't. You have to build yourself a community. Your meso is your organization. So that's like who's working with your child. That's PT, speech. That's ABA therapy. You're going to look for trusted and knowledgeable professionals, other parents to help you, autism groups. Your macro is going to look like your community at large. Um, it's going to look like if, for instance, you needed to initiate the Social Security, or if you needed to initiate some other type of government assistance or healthcare assistance somewhere, that would, some place like Carepatrol, that would be helpful in helping you with your child. Carepatrol, you would probably go more into meso, but it could go into macro. So it could be like a circle that are intersecting one another there. But you're looking for your community networks and organizations that are going to be able to help you help yourself. Respite care, definitely. You're going to be looking at your other connections that can really help you get through what's going on with you and your kiddo. So, parenting styles that and parenting elements. Well, there's different ways of doing all kinds of things, and you have your helicopter parent, and most autism parents may start out this way because you're like, don't do that. Oh, no, 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 no. You're trying to head off the problem before it happens. So you'll stop the child before they say that thing, or you'll pick the child up, or you'll redirect the child before they do that thing that you would be also embarrassed that they do. Um, you know, and usually here's the issue with the helicopter parenting is that you are not allowing your child the space to grow and the space to make mistakes and then to readjust. Now, granted, children on the spectrum don't have a lot of foresight to understand why, and they don't see it coming. But if you're always stopping them in the middle of a process, they don't learn how to connect. Their hard wiring doesn't get there. So you stunt development. And that even happens with neurotypical children. And they're unable to learn by observation and example because they have to learn by direct instruction and by actually doing, sometimes putting their hands on it. There are different learning styles. And so when you're helicopter parenting and you're just swooping in and you're just like stopping it, you're not allowing that connection to happen for a child who already doesn't understand the world around them. The permissive parent, you just have no expectations. And then the thing about that is you're just like, oh yeah, they're on the spectrum. We're just kind of let them do. They don't know. You're giving permission for your child just to do and be. And maybe that's not the best thing to think about because they're going to be in situations in um, social situations with other children, and their expectation is not for that your child to be able to go and be. Um, and so, although autism does make things a little more difficult for understanding for your child, the world is not going to allow your child to go and be. The world is not going to allow your child to just do whatever they want to do. And it teaches bad habits that you have to be able to explain. You may be able to explain as a small child, but do you really want to explain that as they get older? If you're allowing them to hit or bite or to take things that don't belong to them um, without trying to redirect or trying to do some of those things. And then, there's as I bleed in with free range parenting, because that's most definitely more hands off. And it allows kids to just kind of do and be and follow their own laissez-faire um, way of living. And it for neurotypical children, it helps them with naturally finding the consequences and balances of life. But for a child on the spectrum who may not understand it and may not get those nuances to begin with, um, sometimes you want to start with teaching um, them things that maybe they don't understand right up front so that when it happens again and it comes back around, they're able to adjust. So tiger parenting. Tiger parenting goes in with authoritarian parenting style and very strict, very inflexible, very much high expectations, which you want to have expectations for your child, but you don't want to make them so high that depending on what that child is, how they're developing, what they're going through, they can't reach those milestones as you expect them right then. And so the authoritative is more nurturing and affectionate. But then sometimes parents are a little upset because sometimes kids on the spectrum are sometimes not as affectionate. So you want to hold hands and you want to cuddle. They don't want to do that because that's not them. Um, and then, there may be, you want to discipline with guidance and open communication, but you have to do that based on who your child is and what they're capable of. So, which one of these styles will work for your child with autism? We don't know. You have to try it out and see what happens. But we do know this: doing nothing makes more potential risk than benefits. So, we want to do something just to make sure that there is some structure and continuity between what's happening with your child. Structure is one of the things that is most helpful in most of the studies for children on the spectrum. Um, they get used to routine and they like to know that things are done in a certain way and what they can expect. So there are a couple of things to be considered there. Okay. So I call this one parenting in the fast track because you have to, not only are you a parent, but now you're an educator and advocate. um, you have to learn the facts about autism, and you are learning the interventions and the treatments. And then when they get older, you're learning about IEPs. And then you're, like I said, you're advocating not only for your child in school, but at church, maybe with their peers, if they go to play extracurricular sports. And then you become a teacher and you're guiding because you're teaching them social skills. You're teaching social thinking, social emotional learning. Why such and such doesn't want to be your friend? Why won't they play? Why won't they do what I want them to do? We're doing that on the neurotypical side as well as the neurodivergent side. Um, but we're also guiding and supporting. So we're not only doing that for our neurotypical children, we're doing it for our neurodivergent children. We're doing that for grandparents who don't understand. We're doing that for lady in Target who doesn't understand. Um, we're doing that for ourselves because we're learning every day about there's something new. And then even when you feel like you've mastered it, sometimes you go back and you have to retake the test again on just allowing your child to be themselves and giving yourself permission to just allow. So sometimes children on the spectrum have a STEM, meaning, they're trying to get that energy from the inside out. So they may flap their hands, they may make noises. And so as parents, you don't want to offend and you don't want to inconvenience people around you. So your child may be making noises or making movements, and you want to quiet that down. You want it to stop. Like, you don't want to bring attention, but then you also want to give them the the ability and the permission to be themselves, and try to teach them or try to balance that out the best that you can. And then assist them with building self-esteem. All of this is a delicate balance. And as a parent, you try your best. And sometimes you fall short, but you get back up and you try again. Okay. Unsolicited advice. You didn't ask me for it, but here it goes anyway. Um, you definitely keep educating yourself and others so that they can understand about what autism is, what your child's going through, but you definitely are educating the masses or people that you come in contact with about autism and how to be kind and how to teach their children to be kind to other people that are different. Um, it's ever evolving. But you are educating them on how to treat your child in that moment. But then you are educating people about how to treat people. You'd be surprised at how many adults sometimes don't know how to treat other people. You'd be surprised. Um, and then the I want to say the hypocrisy of it all, but just learning, teaching other people how to be tolerant of people that are not like them. Um, I want to say learn and study your child, because there are so many because autism is on a spectrum from light to dark, big, little, prism. Um, every child is not the same, but there are bedrocks and cornerstones that are that are the same across the board. Say, for instance, most children with autism do not use direct eye contact. Well, I was born and my father was in the Marine Corps. Hoorah. And so when you do not use direct eye contact, that could potentially mean that you are lying. You are lying because you are not looking me in my face and you're not talking to me. But like I said, children with autism usually do not look people in the face. So they'll gaze off. Um, that's an educational thing for you to be able to teach um, others about autism. Doesn't mean they're lying. Um, and that's how you can teach somebody about your child and then teach somebody about autism. Um, and so that's another thing about learning your child and what their nuances are and paying attention to what may cause a meltdown with your child, and not comparing your child to someone else. That's a huge no-no. That's where you can probably get yourself kind of hung up in the why doesn't my child do X, Y, or Z? Um, and we try not to get there. I wanted to say early intervention and treatment is very pivotal. I got my son into early intervention. He must have been 6 to 8 months or 6 to 9 months old when I got him into early intervention. And we started working with a team of people that help him fortify him to where he is today. He actually is talking. He talks more than I do. He talks all the time now. He didn't talk till he's about six or seven. But now, boy, he talks all the time. I'm telling you what speech pathology will do for a child and just working with them. Um, you can't parent all children alike. You can't. I think I've said that before, but you can't. And if you're looking for, okay, well, I did my first child like this and my second child and da da da, or I did, it will, you can try it. Like I said in the other slide, you can try it out, see what happens, but you may not like what you get. So the best thing for you to do, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, is to go at this like you would go makeup. You know, you have fall, you have winter makeup, and you have summer makeup. You know, you don't put your summer makeup on in the winter, and you don't put your winter makeup on in the summer because you just kind of look a little weird with the different colorations that are going on. So, and you know what, y'all? If y'all heard that in the background, that is my son. um, you just can't you can't parent them like you would any other. And you have to roll with the punches because I have a sign on my office. I have my office here at home. The sign says, don't open the door or mommy's working or something like that. Well, my son reads very well. He reads he's 9 and he's just left the third grade and he reads on a 10th grade level. So I know he understands the words that are on the sign. That doesn't mean he's gonna do what's on the sign. Doesn't mean it. If he wants to talk to me now, he's gonna talk to me now. And he doesn't really care. If Care Patrol wants to talk to me too. He's going to definitely do that. If he feels like he needs to walk around and move, or he wants to fidget, he's going to do that. um I'm saying all this to say, just don't make any assumptions of what you think it's supposed to be and what it should be or what it could be. You kind of have to ride the wave and go with it, and not take things personal. I'll give a good example here. My son told me that I am not his favorite parent. Hurt my little heart. He told me I wasn't his favorite parent. His dad was his favorite parent. His dad was his favorite parent because they were both boys. He was like, "Yep, dad's my favorite parent." And although I do a lot of the parenting, now my husband and I do all of the parenting, but I take him to OT, PT, speech, most of the majority of the food sometimes because I kind of know how he likes seasonings and things like that. Um, if his dad gives him his plate, he's like, "Oh, Dad, this is the best food you've ever made." And I was like, "Uh, okay, okay, kid. What's up with that?" He's like, "Yeah, Mom, you're awesome sometimes too." Okay. Um, you just I don't take it personal. I'm like, "Okay, kid. You love your dad. I love your dad. We love your dad." He's like, no, my dad. Um, you know, I don't take it personally. He um he is who he is. He likes what he likes, and I just do not take it personally because it's not about me. He's just expressing what he likes. Um, and don't be afraid to show emotion. We have to let that out because if we don't let that out, we will breed a ground for sadness, depression, anxiety, hostility. We get angry not only with ourselves or the people around us in our family units, but then sometimes you get upset with your kid and they haven't done anything. But burnout is real, so you have to take care of yourself and you have to take care of your needs because if you don't, you're surely to melt. My favorite place is being in my car, and I will pull into my driveway or into our garage, and I will sit in the car, and he will come out and go, "Well, what's taking you so long? What's up?" And I'm like, give me a minute. And then he'll come back in literally 60 seconds. He's like, tick, tick, tick. But you have to give yourself that time, because if you don't, um, you never know. You could take something very small and blow it up, and you didn't mean to. It's just because you haven't been taking care of yourself, or you haven't gone to a doctor yourself. Burnout is real. Take care of yourself and find yourself a community. All right. We think we have life figured out until life happens. And that's exactly what it is. Like, we think that we have our birthing plan together. We have all these things together. And places like Carepatrol help us with that. But then life happens. And there are places like Carepatrol that help us get through when life happens. And you have to let those things, let those avenues and those connections help you, because we try to be in control of so many things. And the things that we can be in control of is how we deal with not being in control. I know that sounds like a paradox, huh? But true. So, um, when life happens, just roll with it, see what happens. And I am done.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. It's very vulnerable and most appreciated to have you share such a personal journey. And I wonder, just as my own question, how are you today?
Doing good. Today is a good day. My son stayed up until 4 o'clock this morning. Um, we were watching, I don't know what, he decided he wanted pickles, but I'm doing great this morning. I said all that to say I am doing great this morning. We had a great morning, although we didn't go to bed until 3. I woke up very excited about the day. Doing good. Thank you.
You had said earlier before we started the presentation that your son was recreating Tom Cruise today in his sock feet and underwear sliding
Yep.
across the floor. What's a typical day with y'all like now?
School just stopped. So when school was in, we have to prepare him for the day. So a typical day is I always prepare him. If something is going to change in his day, I let him know so that he can have some control over, he'll know what's going on. And then if he doesn't, I'll give him choices. So, hey, for breakfast, would you like this or that? Okay, you pick this and not that. We'll have breakfast. We'll get ready to go to school. I'm always reminding him about what time it is so that he can be cognizant of the time. I'm trying to teach him to be a responsible adult, try to get places on time. We take our medicines, we go to school. I let him know what's going to happen after school. Are you going to stay after school, or I'm going to pick you up? And we always try to let him know who is going to pick him up so he doesn't have a whole come apart. Because if you tell him at 8 o'clock that daddy's going to pick him up, something happens at work and nobody tells him before school ends, there's a problem. So we always try to prepare him for those things. And then after school, I let him know what we're having for dinner. And then we have after school play, dinner play, do homework, and then we start our bedroom routine, our bath time routine, where I remind him of all the things that he has to do. He has checklists, things that he has to do, and then we get ready for bed. We do a wind down, turn all the lights down, turn all the music, all the TVs down, turn things off, and then we prepare for a descent into the airport of going to sleep. We prepare for descent and going to sleep. Typical day.
So it sounds like structure is very important for your child, but I feel like structure is very important for what you call neurotypical children as well.
Mm-hmm. It is. But you can kind of freestyle it with neurotypical children. You can go, okay, well, we were gonna have hot dogs or we were gonna have spaghetti. We don't have any mama changed her mind, we're gonna have this. Well, now my child's having a meltdown. He's like, why are we not having such and such? Um, you know, not going the same way to school will trigger. It's like, okay, well, we're going to make this turn. We're going to do this. Sometimes having a change in schedule for children on the spectrum, because they're expecting it to be a certain way, they kind of memorize things being a certain way. And when it doesn't happen that way, it kind of ticks them, like tilters how their day is going to go. So we try to keep things as consistent as possible in that regard. Yeah.
And you've been, it sounds like, successful in building out your network, micro, macro, and what was the third one? Meso.
It's ever changing. Even with, say, for instance, we use Hands program. They one of his we started out with a team, and then people leave, they go on to better opportunities, and we had a different team that came in to help with him, and he did not like that because he had been with this group for 6 or 7 months, and he want nobody for him nobody prepared him that things were going to be changing, and so we tried to build out as good of a team as we can, but things change.
Mm-hmm.
It's ever changing.
But you seem to be rising to the task, and it sounds to me as if he's doing really phenomenally. I mean, reading on a 10th grade level at age 9 is pretty darned impressive.
Yeah, I think he reads better than me sometimes. I started out with just, we started out doing the things, like phonics, and he just excelled. And sometimes you find that there are certain things that children or elements of education that they will do well in. He does well with reading, he does well with math, but his deficits, on the other hand, would be he doesn't understand social cues. So, like sarcasm, he doesn't get that at all. Or how some kids can read the room. Like if you like your mama had that look, like if she gave it to you, like you knew
Right.
to just stop it. No, he doesn't read the room like that. That doesn't happen. So there are some things that work well for him. I started that even with my daughter. We just read a lot, and we didn't use baby words. We used college words, adult words. We used the dictionary and a thesaurus, and he just kept going with it.
Ms. Holly has a question. Do you have issues with getting your son to try new foods? My daughter has atypical behaviors, but don't meet criteria of the autism diagnosis. We struggle with getting her to eat better choices of food.
Absolutely. I absolutely do. I think at one point my child was only eating about 3 or 4 different foods, and there are certain colors that he just didn't care about, and there are a lot of textures that he didn't care about either. Yes, we started out with when you have puree baby food, everything's the same texture. It just has a different taste. So I could get him to try different things there. But when you start introducing table food, the textures change. So the texture change and the flavor changes. So what I have to do with him now is I just ask him to take we have a no thank you bite. I know that sounds real, but we do. You have to at least try one bite. One. You never know. You might like it. So we do a no thank you bite. And if he takes one bite and he doesn't like it, we don't we don't harp on
But no thank you bite sounds like it could be something that all of us employ in our lives
it.
when we meet life's challenges that we didn't expect.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody could have one of those. I would definitely still not do it with Brussels sprouts, but I wouldn't tell my kid that.
I'm on the fence on Brussels sprouts. It depends on how much effort went into them.
Right. Oh, let me say something. You know what? One thing that they told me when we were doing early intervention, they told me to make food, and then they would play with it. And I was like, well, why are you playing with my good food, people? I don't understand this. But what they said was, if your child won't touch it, they won't eat it. Think about that now. If you won't touch it, you probably won't eat it either. So I use that even in my clinical practice when I do play therapy, even with adults, with children. If they won't touch it, they're most likely not going to eat it. They're not going. My son will smell things. And he'll look at it, he'll examine it. Um, he'll poke it a little bit, and if they won't touch it, they probably won't eat it.
Miss Scott says, my son is 17 and is high on the spectrum, and I only had one counselor to tell me that he was on the spectrum. I learned around age 14 that if I give him 3 to 4 heads up on changes or events we have to attend, it stopped all the tantrums the day of. He would have a whole meltdown crying that he didn't want to go down right, refusing to go, then an apology and say, I'm okay going. And Miss Dowdle says, we struggle with food choices too. Our doctor told us at one point some nutrition was better than none. We get him
Mm-hmm.
to try things, but I do a lot of picking my battles also. So I'll admit I don't always push the issue. The no thank you bite sounds like a great idea. And Miss Cole says, my nephew is 4 years old and has limited communication, but he reads chapter books. They are skipping pre-K and sending him to kindergarten for now. My brother and sister-in-law are nervous about it, but happy at the same time.
Yeah.
Miss Eshman, my son is 27 and has a diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome back when they delineated diagnoses 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you have a lot of colleagues and compatriots, and I'm happy that they've found you today. We're nearing the end of our hour. I'll read for you now again the evaluation link. Our password is autism with a capital AUTISM. And the survey link is https:// www.surveymonkey.com/lowercase r/ all uppercase letters G as in girl 3 K 5 X T as in Tom 3. Thank you again, Dr. Brown, for being here. I again appreciate you being so vulnerable and sharing with us your personal journey. And I know that Ms. Knight, I just posted the link again, but I'll post it one more time. Uh, Thank you for sharing your personal journey. I know it touched a lot of the people on the line, and we appreciate it. And while Carepatrol doesn't work with adolescents, we certainly do want to work with those who are in need, just as I know that you do in your own private practice. Ms. Dowdle says, thank you for your transparency. Many thanks to you. And I hope all of you will join us on Monday of next week when Dr. Rebecca Sipma of the UAB Neurological Disorders Clinic presents to us on multiple sclerosis. So you all hope you have a really wonderful rest of your Memorial Day holiday. If you're on holiday, if you're at work, enjoy the rest of your day and week, and hope to see you all Monday. Thank you, Dr. Brown.
Thank you.